Welcome back to Mr. Nightgrim, and today we're diving into 8 true neighbor horror stories. Not the kind you read online, but the kind that strike while you're just trying to live your life. Next door, across the hall, just over the fence. These stories do not start with a scream. They start with a sound you almost ignored. But before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Because timing has a strange way of lining up with things that shouldn't be happening. And if these kinds of moments grab you, subscribe now so you don't miss what shows up next. Thanks for being here tonight. Let's begin. I just moved into this older brick apartment building near downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet, and the rent didn't make me sick. My place was on the 2nd floor, and above me was a single 3rd floor unit with a window that faced the same alley as mine. That's where I first saw her, an older woman with shoulder-length white hair, always in a pale blue robe, waving gently from behind the glass. I don't know why it stood out. Maybe because she did it every single night. Always. At 10:07 p.m. Not 10:05. Not 10:10. 10:07. I noticed the pattern on my 3rd or 4th night when I stepped out to smoke and caught her silhouette moving behind the curtain. She'd pull it aside just enough to see out, then lift her hand in a slow, graceful wave. At first I thought it was sweet. Maybe she was just lonely. I started waving back. Nothing weird. No creepy smile or odd behavior. Just a quiet, consistent gesture from a neighbor I assumed was set in her routine. But the first thing that bothered me was something stupid. One night I got home late from a movie around 11:15. I passed under her window, looked up out of habit, and she was still standing there. Not waving, just watching. I waved anyway, awkwardly, and she lifted her hand half an inch like she was acknowledging me, but her face looked blank. Not confused, just wiped clean, like she wasn't really seeing me. The second thing was harder to brush off. I was talking to the building manager while my kitchen sink was being repaired. Just casual conversation, and I mentioned something about the lady upstairs always waving at me. He paused mid-turn of the wrench. "Upstairs?" he asked. "Unit 3B. I nodded. "That unit set's been empty since COVID. The last tenant moved out in 2020. We haven't sets released it yet. Needs rewiring." I blinked. No. Someone sits definitely up there. Every night at 10. He cut me off. No one sits up there. No power, no water. Place is locked. That night, I stood in the alley with my phone in hand, ready to record her. At 10:06, nothing. Just the faint rumble of a city bus a few blocks away, and the occasional drip from an upstairs AC unit. My chest tightened as 10:07 rolled around. There she was. Curtain drawn aside, blue robe, pale face, eyes fixed downward. She raised her hand in the same calm, steady wave. I hit record, but the moment I waved back, her expression changed. Her face twisted, not in anger, but fear. Her mouth moved soundlessly, lips forming clear words. "Dawn Stead, open your door." I froze. A jolt of heat rushed up my neck, then drained to ice. She kept mouthing it over and over, eyes widening, now frantically tapping the glass as if trying to warn me. I didn't wave back this time. I backed away, fast. Upstairs was supposed to be empty, locked, no power, no one. I hurried inside, locked my deadbolt, and checked my video. It showed nothing. My phone recorded the alley, the building, my own face for a second, but no woman, no waving, no curtain movement, just silence. At 10:08 I heard a knock, not on my front door. From inside my apartment, from the closet behind me. The knock was soft, but it landed like a gunshot in the quiet of my apartment. I didn't move at first. I just stood there in the middle of my living room, staring at the narrow hallway that led to my bedroom and the closet inside it. My ears strained for any second sound, but all I could hear was the hum of my fridge and the distant honk of traffic a few streets away. Then it knocked again. Same rhythm. 3 short taps, evenly spaced. Knock, knock, knock. Not from the front door. Not from the neighbors. From inside the bedroom. I didn't call anyone. I didn't grab a weapon. I just started walking, slow and quiet, toward the sound. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through water. My palms were slick, and I kept wiping them on my jeans without realizing. The hallway was dark, but a pale amber light from the street lamps outside filtered through the blinds, casting long striped shadows across the carpet. The closer I got to the closet, the colder the air felt, not AC cold, but like standing near an open freezer. I paused just outside the bedroom door. It was wide open. I could see the closet from here. The louvered doors were shut, but the left one quivered slightly like it hadn't latched fully. I waited, breath held, watching for movement. Nothing. I reached out, touched the doorknob to the closet, held my breath, opened it. Empty. Just my jackets, shoes, couple boxes, the usual mess. Nothing looked out of place. No signs of forced entry, no holes in the wall, no disturbed floorboards. And yet, something felt off, like the closet was too quiet, like the air was thinner inside it. I shut the doors, backed away, and stayed up until sunrise with every light in the apartment on. The next day, I went to the third floor. The door to 3B had a padlock on it, not just a latch, but an old rusted lock threaded through a chain. There was yellowing tape on the doorframe. I pressed my ear to the wood. Silence. Then, and I swear to God this happened, I smelled something. Old perfume. The same sweet powdery scent that used to drift down into the alley when the woman waved from her window. It was faint, but distinct, like roses and mothballs. I turned and left fast. That night I didn't go to the alley. I stayed inside, lights off, hoping she wouldn't appear. But she did. At 10:07 p.m., her face was in my window. Not upstairs, not across the alley. My window. Blue robe, white hair, face drawn tight with panic. She slammed her palms on the glass and mouthed something more violently this time. "He steps in the closet. He steps in the closet." I didn't look behind me. I couldn't sit. Something creaked inside the apartment. My bedroom door, slow, hinges groaning like an old swing. I bolted for the hallway and yanked open the front door. I didn't stop to grab my keys or shoes. I ran down the stairs barefoot, 2 at a time, and didn't stop until I was on the street, gasping, heart rattling in my ribs like it wanted out. I stayed at a friend's for 3 nights. When I finally came back during the day to grab my stuff, everything looked fine, nothing moved, nothing broken. But when I opened the closet, just to be sure, I saw something tucked behind the shoeboxes. A handprint, pressed into the back wall, small, pale, with 5 long finger streaks dragging upward toward the ceiling, and scrawled underneath in cracked drywall was a single phrase: "Too late." I moved out that same day, but every night at 10:07 I still check the window. And sometimes, just sometimes, she sits, still waving. But now she sits waving at something behind me. Thursday nights were always my reset time. I'd drag the bins out to the curb, throw in whatever junk I didn't want to look at anymore, and tell myself that tomorrow I'd start fresh. My neighbor, an older guy named Paul, had the cleanest yard on the block, but I never saw him. His trash cans, though, they were always out before mine. 2 forest green bins lined up perfectly by the street, lids shut tight. About a month ago, I noticed something strange while taking mine out. I was halfway down the driveway when I thought I heard talking, soft, muffled, like voices behind a wall. I paused and looked around, expecting to see someone walking their dog or chatting nearby. But the street was dead quiet, just the occasional rustle of dry leaves across the pavement and the distant buzz of a porch light. The sound was coming from Paul Sip's trash bins. I walked closer, real slow, thinking maybe a Bluetooth speaker or a phone had gotten tossed. I leaned in. Whispers. Actual whispering. Too low to make out words, but definitely a conversation. 2 voices. One rapid and breathy, the other slower, dragging out the syllables. It wasn't English. At least not any English I could recognize. I blinked, stepped back, and immediately told myself it was just wind tunneling through the lid. But the next week, it happened again. Same thing, Thursday night, bins out, and the voices started as I got close. I crouched down this time, not touching anything, just listening. One of the voices paused, and then shifted, like it noticed me. It grew louder, faster, almost excited. I stood up quickly, heart bumping a little harder than I'd admit. There was no smell, no sign of rot, No insects. The cans were clean. Too clean. The following week, I tested something. I walked by earlier than usual, around 9 p.m. Before I brought my own trash out, I kept my phone ready, hoping to record it. Nothing. Just silence. But the moment I returned from my side of the curb with my bags, the whispering kicked up again, like it waited for me. I passed by slowly, phone held low. I recorded everything, 5 straight minutes. When I played it back inside, there was no audio, just the faint shuffle of my own footsteps. That night around 11:30 p.m., I walked by one more time. No phone, just me. The air had turned colder and the clouds above looked bruised. I held my breath, leaned in, and I heard my own voice. Clear as day, coming from inside Paul's trash bin. It was saying things I'd never said, not out loud. Anyway, I didn't mean to hurt her. She wouldn't stop screaming. I buried the knife near the creek. I staggered back. My throat tightened, and my palms stung from how hard I'd clenched my fists. I backed away and didn't sleep that night. By the next morning, the bins were gone, rolled back beside Paul's garage like always. The neighborhood felt too normal, like it had swallowed the strangeness overnight. But I couldn't leave it alone. So the next Thursday, just before midnight, I walked over and whispered into the lid, "Who are you?" Silence. Then, a soft breath, a pause, and a whisper, low and thick, like someone speaking with a swollen tongue. "Your replacement." I stepped back fast, nearly tripping over the curb. My chest was tight, the wind had picked up, rustling the dry branches above, but everything else was still. That whisper had been deliberate, not a trick of the wind or my imagination. It had replied. It knew I was there. I didn't touch the bin. I just went inside and locked the door. Every light on. I stared at the ceiling most of the night. I kept hearing faint sounds, not from outside, but from the corner of the living room where my own trash can sat. A plastic echo, like something inside was moving around. I didn't check it. The next morning, I forced myself to pretend everything was normal. Coffee, shower, laptop. But as I opened the front door to grab the mail, I saw something that made my stomach dip. Paul Sip's trash bin was gone. Both bins, actually, not just rolled back, missing. His driveway looked untouched, like nothing had been placed there at all. But worse, at the edge of my driveway, next to my own bin, there was a third trash can I didn't recognize. Same green plastic, same make, but no number on the lid, no stickers, just blank. It hadn't been there when I came home yesterday. I walked over cautiously and nudged it with my foot. It was warm. I lifted the lid, slowly, ready to bolt. Inside were 3 things: a black hoodie, my spare house keys, and a small crumpled scrap of notebook paper with one word written in shaky capital letters. Soon, the air in the bin smelled faintly like burnt rubber and old pennies. I slammed the lid shut and dragged it straight to the backyard. I didn't even want it near my driveway. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I left it behind the shed and didn't go near it again. That night I brought my trash out like always. I waited, watched. Paul Sip's lights never came on. His house stayed dark, silent. Just past midnight, I crept around the side of my own garage toward the backyard. The third bin was gone. Not knocked over, not moved, just vanished. I didn't sleep. I left the TV on and sat up until morning. Every sound felt loaded. The fridge humming, the pipe settling, the occasional car in the distance. At 7:12 a.m., I finally drifted off on the couch. At 7:36, a sharp knock jolted me awake. I sat up straight, looked at the front door. No one there. I checked the side windows. Nothing. Street empty, birds chirping like it was just another morning. But then I looked down at the welcome mat. There, sitting neatly in the center, was that same black hoodie, folded. And on top of it, a photo of me, standing in front of my house, wearing that same hoodie, trash bin behind me, smiling. Only problem? I never posed for that picture. And the timestamp in the corner? Tomorrow Sips' date, 4:17 a.m. I don't take the trash out anymore. But sometimes, when I pass by my neighbor's driveway, I still hear something faint and fluttering, like the crackle of a voice. caught mid-sentence, waiting for me to come closer. And every now and then, one of those blank green bins shows up again, just for a night, and something inside it knows my name. I moved into a small cul-de-sac last winter. Quiet neighborhood, modest houses, and mostly older couples. I worked from home and didn't know anyone well, but I always noticed the house directly across from mine. Blue shutters, well-kept lawn, and a warm yellow porch light that flipped on like clockwork every night around 8. It was subtle at first, the blinking. I only noticed it because I'd started taking smoke breaks around the same time each evening. The porch light would flicker a bit, stay on, then flicker again. At first I chalked it up to old wiring. Houses like these always had quirks. But after a few nights, I realized the pattern wasn't random. The flashes came in bursts, short flicks followed by long ones. Then a pause. Then it would repeat. I started counting the intervals out of habit. 3 short, 2 long, pause. Then 1 short, 1 long, 4 short. It hit me on the 5th night. It wasn't just a flicker, it was Morse code. I pulled out my phone and opened a Morse translator app. I felt dumb for even trying, but something about the repetition stuck with me. I typed in the sequence I'd just seen. HELP. My breath caught. I waited. The light flashed again. ME. I watched the screen in my hand as the rest came through. It spelled out slowly over 5 minutes. Help in me. He's not my USB end. I just stared at the house. The blinds were drawn tight. Nothing moved behind the windows. But that porch light kept blinking soft and steady against the dark. The next day I walked past their driveway on purpose. A man in his 50s was raking leaves. Broad shoulders, flannel shirt. He looked up, smiled, and gave me a nod. I nodded back and kept walking. Behind the curtain I caught a glimpse of someone watching me. That night the light blinked again. Same message, same plea. I started keeping notes. The sequences were consistent, like whoever was doing it had practiced. It always started at 8:02 p.m. I didn't want to call the cops without more, but I couldn't shake it, so I decided to send a reply. I went out to my garage and rewired an old motion sensor floodlight, ran a cable to my porch and rigged a manual switch. I used a guide on my phone and sent back a simple message. Are you okay? Nothing. The porch stayed dark across the street. Until the next night, 8:02 p.m. sharp, the light flashed again. But this time it wasn't just a message. It repeated my question back to me. Are you okay? Then it started a new line. He watches me type. I can only use light. I felt a cold pressure settle in my chest. My mouth went dry. Do you need police? The porch light paused. A full 30 seconds. No, he is police. I nearly dropped the switch. Something slammed against the window behind me, just the wind, I told myself, but I still flinched hard. I didn't send anything else that night. I couldn't stop thinking about her, whoever was behind that blinking light, trapped inside her own house, sending messages into the night. And him, watching her, pretending to be someone he wasn't. The whole thing felt like a game of telephone with a life on the line. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. The next day I didn't go outside. I kept the curtains closed and tried to focus on work, but every hour that passed made my chest feel tighter. I'd read those words over and over in my notes. He is police. My mind kept looping questions. Was he her husband? An officer? Someone impersonating both? And what was I supposed to do now? At 8:02 p.m. sharp, the porch light across the street blinked again. I couldn't help myself. I went to the window and peered through the blinds. The same steady rhythm began. I translated it slowly, line by line. He suspects stop. To stop done reply. Then it stopped altogether. The porch light went out. I stared at the dark window, heart thudding. Whoever she was warning me to back off, to stop communicating. My fingers were numb, and the silence felt heavy, like something in the street was holding its breath. I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, convinced I heard something on the porch, a shoe scraping, leaves crunching, but every time I looked, there was nothing there. The next night I hesitated to even look. I kept the lights off and sat in the dark, phone in hand, watching the clock. 8:02 p.m. Nothing. 8:04. Still nothing. But at 8:08 p.m., My porch light blinked. I froze. One short flash, then a pause. Two long ones. It was using my light. Someone was inside my circuit, tapping into my system. I hadn't rewired it for that. The manual switch had no remote. The message came slow. HELLO. I stared at the blinking light above my own door. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. My house was sealed. I checked every door, every lock. How was this possible? Then the next line started. My name. It was spelling my name. One letter at a time. Perfect. Slow. Deliberate. THEYSEEYOU. I backed away from the window, phone shaking in my hand. Suddenly, the light turned solid. No more blinking, just on. My phone buzzed, a new notification from my own security app. Motion detected, front door, 8:11 p.m. I opened the live feed. The camera was frozen, just static. I ran to the back window. The alley behind my house was empty, but I kept feeling like someone was watching me from too close, like the walls were breathing. Another buzz. Motion detected, basement, 8:12 p.m. I didn't instead have a basement camera. I didn't even have a basement, just a crawl space. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the back, running 2 blocks to the corner gas station. I waited there for 20 minutes, pacing under flickering fluorescent lights, trying to catch my breath. My hands were ice. My back itched like something was crawling up it. I called a friend who lived across town and stayed there that night. Told him it was a blown fuse. I couldn't explain it, not without sounding crazy. The next morning I went home. Everything looked normal. Doors locked, lights off. But something about the air felt off, like the house was listening. I walked up to my porch and saw something taped to the inside of the storm door. A folded yellow sticky note, held in place with clear tape. My stomach dropped before I even touched it. I peeled it off and opened it slowly. Just one sentence, scrawled in blocky red ink. You switch now. I looked up. Across the street, her porch was dark. No blinking light, no message, no sign of anyone at all. Just the slow creak of a front door closing from inside my house. The first thing I noticed after moving into the cul-de-sac was how quiet it was. Just 6 houses tucked around a U-shaped bend, all nearly identical. Beige siding, small porches, and 2-car garages. Most days the only sound came from sprinklers ticking on, or dogs barking faintly behind fences. It was exactly the kind of quiet I'd been looking for. Except for one thing. The house next door, pale blue with cracked siding, had a garage that never opened. Not once in the 3 months I'd lived there. Every other neighbor used theirs daily. But this one, it stayed sealed. No cars came or went, no movement. Just a dusty, windowless slab of a door that faced the street, like a blank stare. I didn't think much of it until one night during a thunderstorm. The power had gone out around 9 p.m. I lit a candle and sat by the front window, watching the rain slash sideways against the street lamps. That's when I saw it, a dim, flickering light coming from the side of the garage. Not a lamp, not lightning. It had a strange, pulsing rhythm to it. I threw on my jacket and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold and heavy, and the rain stung against my skin. I walked slowly down my driveway and crossed into my neighbor's yard. The flicker was coming from a small slit near the top of the garage door, warped wood, slightly pulled away from the frame. I got close, leaned in, and squinted through the crack. Inside, something was playing. It looked like an old film projector, grainy black and white footage looping on the far wall. The image was shaky, but I recognized the angle. It was my house, the same porch, same bushes, but it looked older, like a version of my house from decades ago. I watched, frozen. The film showed someone stepping onto the porch. At first I thought it was me, same height, same jacket, but the timestamp flickering in the corner said 1975. The figure knocked on the door and then turned around. For a second, the film froze on their face. It wasn't set me, but it was close. I stumbled back from the slat, heart pounding, and ran home without looking back. The power came back on just before midnight, but I didn't sleep. The next morning I tried to laugh it off, told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe an old home video left playing inside, as impossible as that sounded. But when I went to grab the mail, I stopped cold. Sitting in the mailbox was a small film canister. No return address, no markings, just a white label wrapped around it in faded red ink. The date on it said, "Tomorrow." I brought it inside, hands trembling. I didn't have a projector, but I knew someone who did. A coworker, Greg, who collected old tech. I called him immediately. "Can you run a reel for me?" I asked. "Sure," he said. "What SIP's on it?" "I don't know yet," I told him, "but I think I set him in it." He came by after sunset. We cleared a spot in my living room and set up the projector. As the reel started to spin, I pulled the blinds shut and turned off the lights. The image jumped to life on the wall, black and white, just like before. This time it was me, standing in my own living room, in this exact outfit, and I was screaming. Greg froze. The whir of the projector was the only sound in the room. On the wall, I watched myself stumble backward, mouth wide, eyes locked on something off screen. The footage had no sound, but my body said enough. I was panicking. The film jumped. A hard cut. Now it showed me asleep in bed, twisted in my sheets. The angle was from above, not like a ceiling cam, more like someone perched in the corner of the room. Greg turned to me slowly. "Did you film this?" I shook my head. My arms felt numb. Another cut. Now I was standing at my front door, opening it. The footage was darker now, grainier. My outline flickered like static. Then something else entered the frame. Just behind me, stepping out of the shadow of the hallway, was another figure, same height, same clothes, same face. Another me. The real me, the one in the footage, never turned around. I reached out and stopped the reel. The projector whined to a halt. Greg stood there with his hands still hovering in the air, like he didn't know what to say. We didn't talk for long. He left quietly, told me to call him if I wanted to check out the film further. I locked the door behind him and shut every curtain in the house. The next day, I walked next door and knocked. Nothing. I checked the windows. All dark, dusty, the kind of stillness you feel in abandoned places. But that night, during another round of storm clouds and wind, I looked out and saw the flickering again. Only this time, the light wasn't coming from the garage. It was coming from my attic. I didn't move for a solid minute, just stood there in the hallway, staring up at the ceiling like I was waiting for the floor to fall in. I didn't even know if the attic had a bulb. I grabbed a flashlight, slid the hallway ladder down, and slowly climbed up. The air was thick, warm and still. The insulation crunched under my feet. The flashlight beam bounced off cardboard boxes, old furniture, a rolled rug, and then it landed on a screen. A canvas sheet rigged between two beams. At its base sat another projector, different model, but definitely running. The reel was almost finished. It showed the outside of my house, then the front door, then my bed again. There was no sound, but in the far corner of the attic, I could hear breathing. Shallow, wet, just beyond the reach of the flashlight. I spun the beam. Nothing. Empty shadows. The sound stopped. I turned and ran, nearly falling off the ladder. I didn't close the attic door behind me. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept checking the front porch, the windows, my phone. No notifications. No messages. Until morning. At 6:12 a.m., I went out to check the mailbox. Another canister. Same faded red label. Only this time, it didn't say a date. It just said last seen. I didn't bring it inside. I left it on the curb. But an hour later, when I walked past the living room, I saw something sticking out of the VCR I hadn't used in years, a VHS tape halfway in. I hadn't yet owned a blank tape in a decade. The label? Just one word scratched in marker. You. I live in a quiet suburb just outside of town, the kind of place where the houses are close enough to share smells from each other's grills, but far enough that you don't have to wave every time you check the mail. My backyard is narrow, bordered by a tall wooden privacy fence that separates me from my neighbor's lot. We've never really talked. I think his name is Joel, keeps to himself. I keep to myself. It works. But lately, something's been off about the fence. It started 2 or 3 weeks ago. At night, when everything else went still, I'd hear this faint creaking. Not like a swinging gate or a loose board. It was rhythmic, slow, shallow groans, as if the wood itself was inhaling and exhaling. It only happened after dark, and always when the wind was dead. At first I told myself it was just the house settling, or maybe the neighbor's dog brushing against it. But then I noticed something stranger. There were knots in the wood, circular imperfections in the panels, same as always. But last week I saw one of them shift, just a fraction of an inch. I stood on my patio, beer in hand, and watched one of the knots slowly tighten, then relax, like an eyelid fluttering in a dream. I dropped the bottle. The next morning I walked the length of the fence, running my hand along the boards. Everything looked normal, no soft spots, no holes, just old cedar with a few knots and warps from weather. I pressed my face close to one of the boards and thought I could smell something faint, not rot, but breath. Warm, damp, human. That night I kept my bedroom window open for air. Just a crack. Around 1 a.m. I heard it again, the soft creaking. I got up and stood by the window, peering out into the dark yard. Then, clear as day, I saw a small round hole open in one of the fence slats, just above eye level. I didn't imagine it. It wasn't a knot this time. It opened like an iris, slow and deliberate. And then it blinked. I backed away, heart thudding in my chest. My breath was shallow and quick. I closed the window, locked it, and didn't go near the fence for 2 days. On the third day, I called the cops. I told them I thought someone had drilled peepholes in my fence, maybe trying to watch me, maybe casing the house. They came out, walked the perimeter, checked both sides. They said the wood was solid, no holes, no tools, no signs of intrusion, just an old fence in need of resealing. I asked them to check the other side, my neighbor's yard. They knocked, no answer. The side gate was locked from inside. One of the officers shrugged and said, "Probably nothing. You ever live near trees? They so move just enough to freak you out." But it wasn't said a tree. That night I didn't open the window. I sat in the dark with the lights off, watching the fence through the blinds, and at exactly 2:14 a.m., it creaked again. Not just one plank, the whole stretch. All of it, like a lung expanding. And the holes came back. 3 of them this time, slowly forming, blinking, watching. I didn't sleep. I stayed up until dawn, watching the fence like it might crawl closer if I blinked too long. The holes didn't disappear until the first trace of sunlight. They didn't close, they just sank back in, as if the wood swallowed them whole. The next day I called my landlord and asked about the fence. He said it had been there since the house was built. Original construction. Why? He asked. Just thinking about replacing it, I lied. He laughed. That thing? Good luck. The last guy tried and quit halfway through, claimed the panels were warped too tight to pull. That night, I put up blackout curtains. But at 2:14 a.m. I still heard it, the slow, straining wood, like someone exhaling after holding their breath too long. I sat in bed, paralyzed, staring at the dark edge where curtain met wall. My ears strained to catch everything. The creak, the lightest tap, and then something new. Scraping. Faint, deliberate, like fingernails along wood, not random, pacing. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and flicked the backyard lights on through the switch. The fence was just there, still, normal. But the air smelled like damp earth, and something sweeter, like sweat and mildew. My stomach twisted. I decided I'd had enough. The next morning I called in sick, went to Home Depot, bought a full sheet of plywood, long screws, and a driver. That night, right before sunset, I boarded up the inside of the fence facing my bedroom window. Just the one section, the part where I saw the blinking holes. It made me feel better for about 5 hours. Until 2:13 a.m. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard a new sound. Not from the fence. From inside the house. A soft tap from the hallway. I sat up, heart racing. The sound, repeated. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the guest room, the one that faces the side yard. I moved slowly, grabbed the flashlight, and inched toward the door. I pushed it open, flicked the beam across the room, and froze. The blackout curtain I'd installed on that window had 3 perfect holes cut through it. Same size, same spacing. And something was on the glass, oily smudges that looked like prints, but not from fingers, from eyes. I backed out and shut the door, hard, locked it, stuffed a towel under the gap. At first light, I checked the backyard again. Everything was the same, except now, the plywood I'd screwed into the fence was gone. Not torn off, not broken, just missing. The screws were still in the grass, lying neatly in a row. I didn't even go to work. I packed a bag and stayed at a motel that night. When I came back the next morning, I found something new. A single new fence panel, installed perfectly, clean, untouched. But only on my side, just one square of bright, unstained wood among the rest of the aging fence. And in the center of it, a peephole, cut from my side, facing inward, directly into my bedroom window. No hole on the other side, no way to see through from the neighbor's yard, only inward. That night, I moved the bed, and now I check that panel every morning. So far as I've never seen it blink again. But once, just once, I pressed my ear to it, and I swear, I heard breathing. I live in a dead-end neighborhood where nothing really happens. The kind of place where you know people by their lawn habits, who mows too often, who lets theirs grow wild, who still has Halloween decorations up in February. For me, it's always been just background noise, routine, quiet, until I noticed the neighbor across the street. I never learned his name. He lived alone, older, always in the same gray jacket, hood up even in summer. Never waved, never brought his trash out during the day, just kind of there. But what made me notice him wasn't the silence, it was the schedule. Every night, and I mean every night, at exactly 3:33 a.m., he walked out of his house and went straight to his mailbox. Not 3:30, not 3:35, always 3:33. I started noticing it because of my own insomnia. I'd be up, scrolling or pacing, and catch movement through the blinds. At first I thought maybe he was just checking if mail had come late. Weird, but not worth thinking about. But it happened again and again. Same time, same walk, same pause. I started setting an alarm out of sheer curiosity. That sets when I noticed what he was pulling out. It wasn't envelopes. It wasn't newspapers. One night, under the pale glow of the streetlight, I watched as he opened the box and reached in slowly, like he knew exactly where to grab, and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in burlap and twine. He paused, cradled it for a second, then turned and walked back inside. That wasn't set mail. The next night I got closer. I crept out around 3:15, wearing dark clothes, and ducked behind my car. I waited, heart tapping in my chest as the minutes ticked by. At 3:33, his porch light flicked on. He stepped out, slow, deliberate, and walked across his lawn to the curb. He opened the box, paused, then pulled something out. It was smaller this time, darker. As he turned, I caught a better glimpse of it. Charred bones, bound in twine. They looked old, brittle, blackened, like they'd been pulled from a fire pit. I didn't move, barely breathed. He turned slightly, as if he'd heard something, then walked slowly back inside. I didn't have sleep after that. The next morning I decided to confront him. I walked across the street just before noon, knocked. He opened the door halfway and just stared. No chain, no hello, just that same flat gaze. "I saw you," I said. "Last night. The mailbox. What was that?" He didn't blink, just tilted his head a fraction and smiled, a slow, unsettling curl of the mouth. "You shouldn't look at things not meant for you," he said. Then he shut the door. I stood there for a second, fists clenched at my sides. But I didn't knock again. I didn't say another word. That night I left the lights on, double-locked everything. Still couldn't sleep. I told myself I'd imagined it, that my brain, wired from too much caffeine and too little sleep, had made more of it than it was. But the next night, something changed. It wasn't Sedim. It was my mailbox. At 3:33 a.m., I heard a soft click, the sound of my own mailbox opening. I sat up in bed, listened. The wind outside was still, no cars, just silence. Then, something new. A whisper, faint, raspy, like paper being torn in slow motion, coming from inside my mailbox. I didn't move at first, just sat there in bed, staring at the door like it might open on its own. The whispering hadn't stopped. It came in waves, faint, breathy sounds like words formed underwater. I couldn't make out anything clearly, but the rhythm felt intentional, too structured to be wind. Eventually, I grabbed my hoodie, slipped on my shoes, and stepped outside with a flashlight. The porch light cast a dull yellow glow across the lawn, but the street itself was still wrapped in shadow. My breath fogged in the cold air. I walked slowly down the driveway, each step loud against the concrete. The sound was louder now, still faint, but steady. Whisper, pause. Whisper, pause. I reached the mailbox and froze. It was open. Just barely, tilted ajar like someone hadn't shut it all the way. I raised my flashlight and angled it inside. Empty. But the whispering was still there, not inside the mailbox now, but all around it, like it was radiating off the metal itself. I reached out and touched the door. It was warm. I pulled my hand back. The temperature dropped almost immediately. I shut the mailbox and backed away. The whispering stopped the second the door clicked shut. I turned around to head back inside and saw a light snap on across the street. His porch light. He was standing there, watching me, just a silhouette, tall, still, unmoving. He didn't come outside, just stood behind the screen and stared. I shut my door, locked it, and shoved a chair beneath the handle. I didn't go back to sleep. The next morning, I opened the mailbox again, just to see. Inside was a small square of parchment, old-looking, browned at the edges, folded tight, no stamp, no return address. I opened it carefully. Inside were two things: a single black thread curled like a tiny noose, and a hand-scrawled message: "You're listening now." I dropped it and stepped back. My pulse roared in my ears. That afternoon, I drove an hour out to the edge of town and bought a brand new locking mailbox, installed it myself before sundown. Steel casing, key access, no moving parts. That night I stayed up, not out of curiosity, out of dread. At 3:33 a.m. I watched from the window. The man across the street came out, walked to his box, opened it, pulled out nothing, just stood there, empty-handed. But then he turned slow, mechanical, and looked directly at mine, tilted his head, smiled, and walked back inside. I waited until morning to check. My new box was locked, still sealed. I held my breath and turned the key. Inside was another note, just one line: "You can lock the box, not the message." That night I moved out, slept on a friend's couch, told myself I'd come back with movers, clear my stuff, list the house online, never think of this place again. I returned 3 days later, and as I pulled into the driveway, something on the mailbox caught my eye. A new feature, a small speaker embedded into the front plate. It wasn't set there before, not part of the model. It powered on by itself, and I swear to God, as I stepped toward it, it whispered one word in a voice I knew wasn't mine: "Soon." I moved into the upstairs unit of a 2-story duplex last winter. Quiet street, big maple trees, and cheap rent for how clean the place was. The guy downstairs, Greg, seemed nice enough. Early 40s, worked from home, kept to himself. We said hey in passing, but that was about it. The weirdness started 2 weeks after I moved in. Greg texted me late one night, around 11:45 p.m., asking if I could keep it down. Said he kept hearing footsteps right above his bedroom, heavy ones, like someone pacing back and forth. Thing is, I was lying in bed when he texted. Alone, lights off, no music, no walking. I told him that, and he apologized, said maybe it was the plumbing or something. No big deal. But a few days later, he knocked on my door again. Same complaint. "Hey man," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, not trying to be a jerk, but it really sounds like you said you're dragging something around up here at night. I blinked at him. "I live alone. I don't just even have rugs yet. What would I be dragging?" He looked embarrassed. "Right, yeah, sorry." I let it go. Until the third time. He texted me again. "Are you dropping furniture or something?" It literally shook my kitchen. That night I invited him up. "Tired of being blamed," I said. He came upstairs around 9 p.m. I showed him the entire place. Sparse furniture. No one hiding in closets. Nothing dragging or pounding or bouncing around. We stood in the middle of the living room, silent. "See, I said. "You stare hearing ghosts." He chuckled, clearly uneasy. Then something made us both freeze. A light flicked on below us. We both turned toward the floor at the same time. From somewhere down in Greg's basement, the fluorescent hum of old lighting buzzed to life. Then, footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Not above us, not around us. Below us. Greg Sett's eyes met mine. He went pale. We bolted down the stairs to his unit. The hallway was dark and the sound was still going. Low thuds, creaking boards, like someone walking in circles just beneath the floor. He pointed toward the back of his unit, where the basement door sat slightly ajar. A strip of light shone from underneath. "I didn't turn that on," he whispered. I didn't reply. The footsteps stopped. We stood frozen outside the basement door, not saying anything. The silence stretched tight between us, like the house was holding its breath. Greg reached for the knob. His hand hovered there a second too long, fingers trembling. I swallowed hard. Maybe just lock it for now? He didn't answer. He pushed the door open. The basement stairs stretched into yellow light. A bare bulb swung gently overhead, casting soft, swaying shadows against the concrete walls. The steps creaked, but not under our feet. We both heard it again. A single footstep. Below, Greg whispered. "I swear no one should be down there." Against my better judgment, I followed him. We moved one step at a time. The air grew colder, the farther down we went, thick and stale, like old water and dust. Each breath felt like breathing through a sponge. The basement was cluttered, cardboard boxes, paint cans, an unused treadmill, laundry baskets. Nothing moved. But in the far corner of the room, a second door stood open. It led to the crawl space, and the light inside it was on. That light shouldn't have even existed. It looked like an old-school bulb fixture with no visible switch, just glowing. And on the dusty concrete we saw them. Footprints. Bare, wide-spaced, human. The prints circled the crawl space and then led unmistakably up the stairs, toward Greg's unit, toward mine. We didn't follow them. We didn't speak. We just backed up the stairs and shut the basement door. He locked it, then shoved a chair in front of it. We both stood in his kitchen, breathing like we'd just run a mile. "Do you have cameras down there?" I asked. He nodded. "Old ones. Motion triggered. Never caught anything. You should check the footage." He hesitated, then opened the security app on his phone, tapped through the feed. One clip had a red timestamp from the night before, 3:17 a.m. He played it. For several seconds there was nothing, just grainy footage of the basement door, closed and still. Then slowly, the doorknob turned. The door creaked open on its own. Nothing entered the frame, until a few seconds later, a pair of bare legs stepped into view. Pale, dirty, unmistakably human, but there was no upper body in frame, just legs, as if the rest of the figure hovered out of sight, dangling from nothing. They stood there in silence, unmoving, before turning toward the stairs and walking up toward us. Greg dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, screen still glowing. "I am leaving tonight," he muttered. "I don't care about the lease." I didn't argue. We both went back to our units, locked every door and window, and didn't sleep. The next day, Greg's car was gone, just like that. I stayed, mostly because I couldn't afford to break the lease. For the first couple of days, everything was quiet, too quiet. No creaks, no pacing, no basement lights. Until the fourth night, I came home late from work and checked my mail. Inside was a folded piece of printer paper. No return address, no envelope, just a grainy screenshot printed on it, a still frame from the camera footage Greg showed me. It showed the basement, the open door, the legs. But this time, the feet were facing the camera, and just barely visible in the reflection of the basement window behind them was my face, watching, but I hadn't been there. I never went back down there, but every night since, at 3:17 a.m., the light in the basement clicks on, all on its own, and someone walks very slowly up the stairs, but no one ever comes out. It started when my neighbor's dog went missing. Penny, a big, clumsy golden retriever who used to bark at everything from shadows to squirrels. He was harmless, kind of dumb, and always wagging his tail. I'd toss him a treat through the fence now and then. He disappeared one evening in early March, and for 2 days straight, my neighbor Emily walked up and down the block calling his name like a panicked mother. I offered to help. We put up signs. We knocked on doors. But by the end of the week, I figured the poor dog had either run off for good or ended up on the wrong side of the highway. Then suddenly, he was back. Or that's what Emily claimed. She said someone had found him by the river and dropped him at the shelter. When I saw her walking him again, leash in hand, I did a double take. He looked exactly like Benny. Same color, same little patch of white under the eye, but something was off. His tail didn't wag. His steps were too even, almost rehearsed. And when I called his name through the fence, he didn't come running. He just looked at me. Not like a dog, like someone pretending to be one. That was the first thing that unsettled me, the way he stared. No blinking, no expression, just stillness, like he was trying to figure me out. The second thing happened 3 nights later. I was taking out the trash around 2 a.m., and the street was completely silent. As I stepped onto the porch, I saw him sitting perfectly still on the curb across the street, just outside the cone of the streetlight. His eyes reflected that eerie green glare, and he didn't move, didn't bark, didn't flinch when I whistled, just sat there watching. It made my spine pull tight. I went back inside without tossing the trash, locking the door behind me with more force than necessary. The next morning I asked Emily about it. She smiled in that too wide, tight-lipped way that never reached her eyes and said, "Oh, he just likes to explore. Sometimes he watches the neighborhood. It helps him feel grounded." I laughed nervously. Dogs don't such watch things. They chase things. She didn't said reply. That was escalation number 2. The third came the following week. I was getting out of the shower and heard my own dog, Milo, a husky lab mix, growling low by the window. Not barking, just growling, throat tight, lips peeled back. I wrapped a towel around my waist and went to see what had him so worked up. Across the street, Benny was standing in the exact same spot, same posture, same stillness, but this time his head was tilted slightly upward, and his eyes were aimed directly at the window. My window. And then Milo stopped growling. Not because he calmed down, but because he backed away from the glass and sat the same way Benny was sitting. Head up, eyes fixed, tail still, like he was mirroring him. I called his name. He didn't move. I clapped. Nothing. Only when I physically pulled him away did he blink and shake himself out of it. I tried laughing it off again, but my hands were shaking a little. Milo had never done anything like that before. He wasn't a weird dog. He was normal, friendly, loved belly rubs and carrots. That night I double-locked every door. I pulled the curtains shut, and for the first time since moving into that house, I slept with a kitchen knife beside the bed. I wish I could say it all ended there, but things only got worse. 2 days later, I woke up to find muddy paw prints across my porch. They were dry by then, crusted into the wood, too big to be Milo's, too defined to be from a stray. They led up to my door, then stopped, no prints walking away. I checked every window, every lock. Nothing had been forced. Milo was sleeping at the foot of my bed the whole night, or at least something that looked like Milo. The next night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark with the porch light off, blinds cracked just enough to see the street. Milo paced around the living room, restless. Every time he passed the front door, he paused like he was listening to something outside, something I couldn't hear. At 2:43 a.m., I saw movement across the street. Not Benny, 2 Bennies. One sitting at the curb like before, and another stepping slowly out from behind Emily's car. I squinted, thinking I was overtired. But no, they were identical, completely. Both moved the same way, sat the same way, tilted their heads at the same angle. I whispered, "What the hell?" Milo let out a low whimper and crawled under the table. Then the one at the curb stood up. I stepped back from the window instinctively, heart rattling under my ribs. I shouldn't have moved, because the moment I did, both of them looked up at the house at the same time, as if they felt me watching. The porch light flickered on by itself, not bright, a soft glow, just enough to cast long shadows. And I swear to God they smiled. Their mouths didn't open wide, didn't bare teeth, just curled in a subtle wrong direction, an expression no dog should make. I slammed the blind shut, didn't sleep, didn't even sit. I waited until daylight and then went to confront Emily, but when I knocked, the door creaked open on its own. Her house was silent, too silent. No TV, no dog, no dishes in the sink. I called her name, no answer. On the kitchen table was a folder. Inside were photos, not of Benny, but of multiple dogs. All of them looked just like him, printed on glossy paper with timestamps. Same fur, same eyes, same expressions. Different dates, different locations. Some had red X's through them. I put the folder back and left. Didn't close the door, didn't look back. That night, I tried not to think. I sat with Milo curled tight at my side, no lights on, just quiet, until I heard the barking. Not outside, from inside the house. I stood up slowly, legs heavy, breath caught in my throat. Milo didn't move. He stared at the door to the basement, the one we never used. The barking came again. Same pitch, same rhythm, same bark Milo always made when he wanted to play. But Milo was right beside me. It was his bark coming from downstairs. My knees buckled. I backed away, hand on the counter where I'd left the kitchen knife. The basement door creaked once. Not enough to open, just enough to let me know something was standing behind it. I didn't sleep that night either, or the next. On the third morning, Milo stood at the front door, staring out through the glass. He wouldn't set come when I called, wouldn't set move. I touched his fur, and it was ice cold. Finally, he walked to the porch, sat down on the top step, and just stayed there, motionless. He didn't set flinch when I nudged him. Didn't that wag. Didn't set blink. I went inside to grab my phone to call the vet, and I swear I was only gone 30 seconds. But when I came back out, Milo was still on the porch, and another Milo was sitting in the grass at the curb, staring up at the house. I looked back at my dog on the porch. He was staring too, at me, and from inside the living room, I heard the sound of paws walking across the hardwood. I turned slowly toward the noise. Every window and door still locked, but as I stepped back inside, something small caught my eye near the hallway floor. A single paw print, wet and perfect, stamped in the middle of the rug. It was facing the wrong way, not toward the door. It was facing inward, and it was still dripping,